Staff Hearing Officer, and I call the meeting of Wednesday, April 11th to order. Today we have 3 items on our agenda, and I haven't received any requests for postponements or withdrawals, so we will hear them in the order that they appeared on the agenda. Under announcements and appeals, we haven't had any recent appeals. However, I did want to announce that last Thursday, April 5th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on an appeal of a decision of the staff hearing officer to not revoke a dispensary permit located at 118 North Milpas Street. And after hearing all the public testimony and reviewing the record, the Planning Commission upheld the decision of the staff hearing officer to not revoke that storefront dispensary permit. And their action is appealable to the City Council within 10 calendar days. That was my only announcement. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the staff hearing officer on items not on today's agenda? No, seeing no one, we'll go to the first item, which is 205 Natoma Avenue. If the applicant would like to come up to the table. Good morning.
Good morning.
Anytime you're ready, Stephanie.
All right. Good morning. We are here talking about 2 modification requests at 205 Natoma. The first is a front setback encroachment, shown here in orange, and the second is an interior setback encroachment, shown here in orange. The 5,564 square foot lot, outlined here in pink, is located at the corner of Natoma Avenue and Burton Circle Drive. The lot is currently developed with a 2-story, 3-unit residential complex and an attached 2-car garage. The complex is non-conforming to the southern front and western interior setbacks, and the setback lines are highlighted in green. The proposed project includes a 3'6" tall site wall along the front lot line facing Natoma Avenue, an interior remodel of 205 Natoma, the 2nd-story unit on the complex, and that would include 5 new window awnings, replacement of the existing front window facing Natoma Avenue with doors, and a 3-foot deep balcony that is the subject of the modification request, and the replacement of an existing window on the western elevation with doors and a Juliet 1'6" deep balcony over here. For the front setback, the existing 2nd story of the building is exactly on the setback line, so any development would be a front setback encroachment. Title 28 does allow for a front setback encroachment of 2 feet for a balcony without a modification. However, the applicant wishes to pursue an extra 1 foot with the modification request for a more functional space for the tenant. Staff supports this front setback encroachment because we both concur with the applicant's position that it would be a more functional space. And also, the lot is currently non-conforming to open yard in that there are no common or private open yard areas meeting all requirements, and this balcony would provide 33 square feet of private outdoor living space for the tenant at 205 Natoma. For the interior setback request, the existing structure is non-conforming to the 6-foot setback by approximately 1 foot. And again, Title 28 does allow for some encroachment without a modification, and so in this case, the first foot of the balcony is allowable, but the 6 inches going farther in does need the modification. It would overlook the neighbor, it's shown here, and specifically it's a garage at the front. The neighbor has submitted an email in support of the project. The staff is also supportive of the interior setback mod because the Juliet balcony isn't expected to cause privacy concerns, because the neighbor is in support of it, but also it's not really meant to be outdoor living space like the front balcony is. It's just to provide additional light and air for the unit at 205 Natoma. The project has been reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission and received positive comments about it being aesthetically enhancing to the architecture. The project is in the coastal zone and has already received a no paperwork coastal exemption, and the project is exempt from CEQA under categorical exemptions 15301 and 15305. Staff has included a recommended condition of approval related to the unlikely encounter of archaeological resources. And other than the email of support from the neighbor, there has been no contact from the public about this project.
Okay, great, thank you. Just one clarifying question. So the application before me today is for a front and interior setback modifications for second-story improvements, correct? Correct. So your proposed condition has to do with ground disturbance, so that would be more of what was in the purview of the HLC versus what the staff hearing officer is looking at, correct?
Correct. So the site wall is just part of the overall project, and so we wanted to make sure to include the condition as part of the environmental review for the overall project.
Okay, so the HLC put this on the project too?
No. There was a...
I can cover that in my presentation.
Okay, great. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
Yeah, I'm Jarrett Gorin from Vanguard Planning. We're the planners on this project. Mike Ober of my office is here. He did all of the drafting work.
I'm a good designer.
Say your name for the
Christy
record.
Gordonera.
So,
Wait, can you spell your last name?
Yes, Gordner.
N-I-N-I-E-R. Okay, great. Thank you.
So this project's been through HLC several times. It's a historic landmark. The structure is, it's in the Mills Act. And so HLC focus was really important on this. And these improvements here, I think Stephanie really covered everything in a lot of detail. Let's address this condition. So HLC previously had approved the site wall, and then we just added this site wall so that everything looks consistent on this frontage. And it's just the footing depth, and the whole area around here is generally mapped as archaeologically sensitive. So they didn't require a phase 1 report or anything, but there's that condition is it's a standard condition the city puts on projects that are within the area. So HLC, we would expect the city to put that on a resolution so that it got carried forward. Our resolution is going to go onto the final plan set, most likely, and that's why we think we agree with staff to go ahead and put that in the resolution today.
Yeah, my comment was just pertaining to the nexus of my conditions of approval on what's before me. So since what's before me is second-story improvements, I was questioning why ground level stuff and whether HLC, but if you're open to it, I'm fine with putting it on the condition, in the resolution on the conditions, just to make sure it doesn't get lost, because it is a standard requirement. But that was more my question in regards to that.
And I think it's okay because that is part of the overall project description, even though it's not something that requires a finding specific to any mods or anything today. So on our front balcony, we are allowed up to 2 feet, and we just want to make it 3 feet. That has to do obviously with the outdoor living space, but also with the proportions of it to the front of the structure. It would just look a little strange to only have a 2-foot deep balcony. So this works with the awning depth and the balcony depth and the corbel depth underneath it, and it doesn't really have an impact on the front setback. The 7 feet back you are already. When you're walking by on the street, it would be hard to perceive something that was 3 feet versus 2 feet. So we think it'll be an appropriate improvement on the lot. And then over here, this Juliet balcony, the neighbor supports it. It is right next to a garage. There's not really any open space this could impact over there. And it's for light and air also. Really what we're doing is we're converting this into a French door. So it's also a requirement for building code compliance. When you have glass that goes all the way down to the floor, you need to have some sort of barrier so that people can't break it and fall out. So obviously it's not size that it could be furnished or usable outdoor space, but it's aesthetic, and it's a building code compliance issue and for light and air. So that's really it as far as what we have to add.
Okay, so in terms of, so you're proposing a Juliet balcony here. Now, why wouldn't a Juliet balcony work here? Not be as needing the mod?
Well, we are looking here. It's really a light and air issue. Here we are trying to provide some usable outdoor space because the unit really has none, and the entire lot has none. There's this little courtyard back here, but it mainly serves the ground floor units. It's not very practical for these people to have to come down and to use that only. So we want to give them a little bit of space up there.
Okay, and then the other question I have is the findings are that the improvements are necessary to secure an appropriate improvement, and that they promote either uniformity of improvement or don't create, there's a hardship related to the property, which I understand has the 3 units, has limited open yard area, has 2 front yards. But when you're requesting an interior yard encroachment, especially on the second floor, we look at the interplay between the two and what potential impacts. So what you're saying to me is that you believe that those findings can be made because it's minimum depth and that it overlooks the roof area versus outdoor area, and that there are windows here, but the angle's such that it doesn't create privacy issues. Is that
Yeah,
what I'm hearing you tell me?
that's our justification for it. Also, that this is a garage and not living space. And in terms of the uniformity of development, this balcony is consistent with all of the development around. I don't know how many of the adjacent properties encroach or not, but most of the units of this style in the immediate neighborhood have similar improvements on their second story.
Okay. Great. All right. So I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 205 Natoma Avenue? Seeing no one. I read that email. Did we receive any other correspondence?
No, that was the only correspondence from the public at all.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll close the public hearing. I did ask, did you get a chance, the way the findings are written, that they're lumped into one, and since there's a front setback modification request and an interior setback modification request, did you?
I did redraft the findings to separate them into 2 separate paragraphs. However, it's still under supervisory review.
Oh, so okay then. All right. Well, I did a site visit and I viewed the surrounding neighborhood and looked at the site. And in regards to the 2 requests, with the front setback modification request and the balcony, I agree it is consistent with the pattern of development in the neighborhood. And yes, it provides a usable outdoor space, and that's one of the project objectives. The site is, it doesn't meet the requirements for open yard area, so it does bring the project closer to conformance with the zoning ordinance. And I know, Jarrett, you've been before me a lot of times. When we look at the front setback modifications, we look at the overall setting of the street and what potential impacts it would have, and the trade-offs between the two. So in regards to your request for the front setback modification, it is consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and it is an appropriate improvement for this site. In regards to the interior setback request for the Juliet balcony, I do have concerns about allowing a second-story balcony in the interior setback. And our new zoning ordinance in areas not in the coastal zone, that's not an allowed encroachment right now. So since it's not adopted in the coastal zone, you do benefit from that allowed encroachment of 2 feet into the second story, or into the interior setback, whether it's on the ground level or the second story. So in your case, technically it is just a 6-inch relief, although since you need the mod, it is for the whole improvement. If I were to deny that, your option is to cut it back 6 inches. And does the 6 inches really make a change to the potential effects to the neighbor? Maybe not. You could still stand out and gaze at the view. This window, existing window, change it to the door. There is a view out that way, but it's not deep enough to stand out that long. And looking at the adjacent development, yes, it's over the garage, and these are living area windows here, but it's at the angle you can't directly see in. So that's one of the good neighbor policies, is that you don't want it looking straight across. So in that case, and then the area where there's no building is way back in this area. So in terms of affecting the privacy of the neighbor, it's relatively low. And I like the fact that you did talk to the neighbor and got their input on it. I do take neighbor comments into consideration. However, the improvements are going to be there longer than the neighbor. And so I do need to look at longer term than this immediate neighbor, but that's good that you had good relations and you spoke to them. So given in reality, the increase that you're asking for is for 6 inches, and the other issues that I said about overlooking the roof, not the open area, it's not adjacent to a window, that request is consistent with our zoning ordinance, and it is an appropriate improvement. And as you stated, the HLC has reviewed it and made sure that it doesn't impact the designated resource. So I will be modifying or changing the findings to encapsulate all that I just said. So when you see the resolution, it will be in a different format. And then in regards to the conditions, since you would like it to remain on here, I'll keep it on here just so that it is on the plans and the contractor is aware of it. So with the changes to the findings, I approve your project subject to that condition, and my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. And if they have any concerns regarding this project, they could call it up during that same 10-day appeal period. And if either of those would occur, Stephanie would contact you. Okay?
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next project is 948 East Carrillo. If the applicant would like to come up to the table. Good morning.
Morning.
Anytime you're ready, Stephanie.
This project is at 948 East Carrillo Road, and we're here to talk about a front setback encroachment and an open yard modification for the size of the open yard for a proposed residential addition. The 2,718 triangular-shaped lot outlined here in pink is located at the corner of Carrillo Road and North Aliso Street. The lot's currently developed with a single-family residence and one uncovered parking space. The residence is non-conforming to all three setbacks, and the setbacks are shown here in green. The proposed project includes converting an existing basement to habitable space to be a master bedroom suite, and it would include a 37-square-foot net addition to accommodate a new staircase to access the basement level. The existing stairs do not meet the California Building Code in terms of stair width and head clearance. So the addition is this portion here. So this little section is the front setback encroachment. And then this is the designated open yard that would remain after the proposed addition. So for the front setback modification, the existing structure, again, is non-conforming to the required 15-foot front setback by approximately 3 feet. The proposed addition would be in line with the non-conforming structure, encroaching no farther into the front setback. So staff is supportive of this to allow a code-compliant stairway to the basement, and because the proposed addition would not be encroaching any farther into the setback. For the open yard modification, the addition would reduce the existing non-conforming open yard from 253 square feet to 210 square feet. And again, staff is supportive of the reduction to designated open yard because of the addition providing an appropriate improvement on the lot, but also because both front setbacks provide a lot of functional open space, although it can't be technically counted towards the open yard requirement. Designated open yards are not allowed to be located in the primary front setback or the first 10 feet of any secondary front setback. However, the lot does have all of this functional space located in these front setbacks. When considering this space, the designated open yard and functional open space, the additive square footage is 2,396 square feet, nearly triple that of the requirement of 800 square feet. The project is eligible for administrative design review, and staff will be able to approve the project if the modification is granted. The project is exempt from CEQA under categorical exemptions 15301 and 15305. However, a recommended condition of approval related to the unlikely encounter of archaeological resources is included in the staff report due to the project being in an archaeologically sensitive area. And finally, staff has received one email in support of the project and no additional correspondences from the public.
Okay, great, thank you. So I noticed that there's a fence here denoted out into the public right-of-way. Do you know, is that permitted? Yes or no is fine. Or I was asking you, Stephanie.
Yes, that fence does have a permit. It was in the street file for 948 Carrillo.
Okay, great, thank you. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
My name is Misael Contreras. And the client would like...
Lights on, great, thanks.
My name is Misael Contreras, and the client approached us because he has a child, and they're soon to have another child, and so the family's growing, and they're trying to maximize the use of their space available. And currently, they have a basement that they use, for the bedroom for the child, and so they want to be able to access this bedroom. Right now, it's through a very narrow and short hallway, which is hazardous, especially if you're carrying a child. So that's how the project began to
Do you want to look at a
expand
floor plan?
basement.
or
Sure,
see-
yeah. We could look at that. So currently,
This is the,
this
oh,
is the
down current, I see,
proposed.
okay, yeah.
Right, so we have this top floor plan that currently it's very narrow, has a winder stair, and due to the configuration of the roof and the massing, there's no headroom, or it's about less than the required 80-inch. So we're proposing to take those stairs out and expand that and actually make it a functional stair to come down to this master suite with sitting room and bedroom, so that they could have room for their growing family. And like Stephanie said, there is space in the front where the child goes and plays. There's hedges and a fence around the whole property, so it's safe for the child to play outside. And you can see this is the whole usable area. We did a diagram of the existing open yard and the what is actually available for open yard space. So I think that's my project.
Okay, great, thank you. So in terms of the site photos, the area we're talking about it's down in here.
Right, so this is down below. This is the entrance to the basement. And there's currently a laundry and a bedroom down there. But it also doesn't meet head height. So we're proposing to dig lower, and that also has to do with, the stairs coming in and reconfiguring the stairs. And you could also see it, let's see, the entrance would be on this side. So you can't really see where it's happening. It would be in the front. The stairs would happen, right around here. It's behind this wall, this CMU block wall.
Okay. Great, thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 948 East Korea Road? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. This site is even more constrained than the previous site.
Yes.
One regarding its lot size. It's extremely small, 2,700 square feet. And with the two front setbacks, there's really, as Stephanie pointed out, the staff report pointed out, there's not any room for additions that would not be inside what we recognize as being your non-conforming open yard area. There is areas that you could squeeze an addition in that's outside of the front setback, but as you can see, the area that's encroaching the front setback is very small. Right. And in terms of the improvement, adding the stairs, this is the most appropriate location for it. It uses the existing area. So in terms of the front setback modification, that's supportable. In regards to the open yard area, that's one of the reasons why I was asking if the fence is permitted or not, because it encompasses a large area of the public right-of-way. And so to be able to be using that as kind of justification for approving this minor addition, that's, if it was an as-built fence, that's not as strong as an argument. However, when you look at the area that is on your property, although it technically does not meet the code provisions for open yard area, it does function that way. Right. And all of it is within a front setback. So in terms of, in the future, any additions proposed in this area, they would need a front setback modification. I don't know if they'd be supportable or not, and an open yard modification. So in terms of over time, additions whittling away this area that's the functional open yard area, that's the likelihood's very low. And in the area of where your proposed addition is, it's not really usable open yard area. And so in terms of taking up areas that's used for open yard, that's not an issue. And I know there's several reasons for open yard, not only for usability, but just for the openness and that kind of thing. But in terms of actual usability, that doesn't significantly impact your open yard area. Mm-hmm. So in regards to your request with a front setback modification, it is just a very minor encroachment of the front setback. It's not significantly going to change the street frontage. As you pointed out, it is behind an existing wall, and so the visibility of it is very limited. So I can make the finding regarding the front setback modification. And then in addition, regarding the open yard modification, it too is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. I'm just doing the finding, and it does recognize the fact that there's two front setbacks, and so that area that is the usable open yard area is not buildable. So I can make the findings outlined in the staff report. There is the condition, as Stephanie described, regarding the archaeological resources, and you've read that and you understand it?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve the requested modifications. My action is subject to those condition, or to the condition of approval. And my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they also have oversight of all my actions. And if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period. And if either of those would happen, Stephanie would contact you.
Great.
Okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Oh, and I would like to note that I did receive the email from Matt and read it. Okay, the last item is 1412 Castillo Street, if the applicant would like to come up to the table. Good morning. How much highlighting do you have on this? Do you want to use my plans that are more colored, or are they in letter? Or is this?
Really, this is the only thing I highlighted because I was just going to use the open yard diagram.
So do you want to use mine? Do you think they'd be better represent? Oh, they're colored. It's
Yeah,
colored.
this is colored.
Okay.
It's just a cover sheet. It's not colored.
Okay. Anytime you're ready, yeah.
All right, this project is at 1412 Castillo Street, and there are 3 modification requests. The first is a front setback encroachment for a proposed residential addition, an interior setback encroachment for a proposed garage, and an open yard modification. So this drawing here is the existing diagram, existing site plan, so I'm going to start here. The existing development on the site, it's an 8,172 square foot lot outlined here in pink, and it's developed with 2 residential units, a detached oversized garage and workshop, and an accessory building at the rear of the lot. The proposed project is to convert this to a 4-unit, average unit size density project with work on every structure on the lot. So moving to the proposed site plan over here, Unit 1 would include a new covered porch, which is the subject of the front setback modification request, an attached 1-car carport, an interior remodel and work on the unit, such as a new roof and exterior siding. Unit 2 would include new covered and uncovered porches, legalization of an as-built addition at the rear of the unit, an interior remodel, and again, work on the unit, such as a new roof and exterior siding. The existing garage would be demolished, and a new garage would be constructed in the interior setback. And I'd like to just make a quick note that in the staff report, we were referencing a 3-foot setback, which is applicable to the existing site plan with 2 units. But when it becomes a multi-unit residential project, a 6-foot setback is required. And so in Sharpie here, it's a 6-foot setback shown. And then unit 3 would be construction of a new unit on top of the existing accessory building on the 2nd floor here, above the garage. And then unit 4 would be the conversion of the existing accessory structure to a residential unit, including an addition and interior remodel. Finally, there would also be site work, such as new hardscaping, new landscaping, partial demolition and reconstruction of the site wall at the front of the lot, and demolition of an unpermitted trellis over the existing driveway. The project would abate violations listed in ENF 2016-01132, including as-built work and illegal dwelling units in both the existing garage and accessory structure. A separate public works permit would be required for removing the existing curb cut because the project is proposing to close off the existing driveway with the reconstruction of that site wall, and then the access would be taken off of the neighboring lot and an existing curb cut, which is also owned by Mr. Butler. And so access to the lot for vehicles would take place on the adjacent property and come up and then go into the garage and all of the uncovered parking spaces here, as well as this carport for Unit 1. There is a recommended condition of approval outlining a future access easement that would need to be recorded on the deed if either one of these properties were to be sold to ensure continued access for both lots. The project is proposing to be developed under the AUD program, and the average unit size would be 948 square feet net, and the max average size would be 1,005 square feet, so it does not exceed that requirement. And standard conditions related to the AUD program are included in the staff report. The project was reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review on March 13th, June 5th, and August 28th of 2017, and it received positive comments at the last hearing, calling the project architecturally acceptable. And then moving into each modification request. At the front setback modification, the ABR specifically requested a covered porch for the front unit to add curb appeal and architectural interest to the project. And rather than encroaching any farther into the front setback, they are proposing to recess this portion here to create the front porch. And as you can see here, this orange portion is in the front setback. There are allowances under Title 30 for front porches to encroach into a front setback without a modification. However, this porch is too large, so it does not qualify. Staff is supportive of this porch as an appropriate improvement because it would not be encroaching any farther into the setback, and it would be providing an aesthetic improvement for the building. The interior setback request is for the garage, the 3rd building here. And it's currently non-conforming to the interior setback, and the new garage would propose the exact same distance from the property line. So it is approximately 1 foot from the property line. And staff is supportive of this request because, again, it would not be encroaching any farther into the setback. The open yard modification, I need to flip. There are 3 aspects to the open yard request. The first is to allow common open yard to be less than the required 15% of the lot area. So 1,226 square feet is required.
1,226?
Yes. 661.75 square feet meets the location requirements for the open yard. An additional 748.5 square feet of common area cannot be counted towards open yard because it is either required egress, shown here in these orange stripes, or because it's site circulation like ramps and landings, and those 2 areas are specifically prohibited from being counted towards common open yard. The second portion of the open yard modification request is to allow the common open yard to be less than the required 10 by 10 dimensions. So there's a large portion here that's all flat, but only one portion in here meets the 10 by 10 requirements. Everything else is restricted by either the access paths or the fact that there's a landing here, so you can't count that, or the fact that this is just too narrow to meet the 10 by 10 dimension. And then the third aspect is to allow the ground level private open yards to have less than the required 10 by 10 dimensions. Each of the proposed 4 units exceeds their private open yard square footages. Just the 3 ground units do not meet the dimension requirements. For example, Unit 3 actually has triple the amount of the required private open yard on the second floor. The cumulative requirement for the 4 units for private open yard is 544 square feet, and what's proposed is 1,446 square feet. So staff is very supportive of the private open yard dimensions given the great exceedance of the square footage. Overall, the open yard required square footage, private and common, is exceeded by 19%. It's just an issue of dimensions. When you also consider the areas that can't be counted, the project exceeds the requirement by 83%. Finally, when you compare, this is an existing site plan, the only open yard area that currently counts and meets the requirements is back here. And so from this scheme to this scheme, the open yard would be increased by 47%.
Why doesn't this area here apply, count? You pointed here. Did you mean all this?
This counts.
Covered with an awning.
This is all covered right now.
And it's illegal awning?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the project is exempt from CEQA under categorical exemptions 15183, and there is a recommended condition of approval related to the unlikely encounter of archaeological resources in the staff report in response to an ARC report that was submitted as part of this project. And finally, staff has received no comments from the public about this project.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't think I have any questions for you right now. So in terms of the required 15%, so they, how far off, or what percentage do they have of the open yard, sorry, in regards to that one?
Sorry, for the 15% lot area?
Yes.
So they have,
What percentage are they?
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but the square footage,
You said there was 661, that meets it. and
661, it's approximately 50%. 661 over 1,226.
53%. Okay, great, thank you. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional
Architect
comments?
Craig Goodman and Chuck Butler.
Okay, property owner. Okay, would you like to provide additional comments?
Well, certainly, we're excited to finally get before you today to discuss all the project changes that have occurred since we've last been to ABR. We did just want to mention that there is a 1'6" distance between the existing non-conforming garage, and we are enclosing a garage door opening that's in width 2 feet of the property line, so we feel that that improvement is making a safety addition to the site. Also, the vehicular reconfiguration of the lot, this being a very narrow driveway as well as curb cut, reducing that for the one-way street leading downhill should make the transportation safer in a general sort of way for the whole neighborhood. And we feel that the consolidation and the maneuverability of the parking lot configuration helps minimize any transportation issues that we currently have on this site, which is all single-loaded, in the site setback non-conforming parking for the most part. The existing one-car garage is being converted to a two-car garage, and we are asking for that portion at just the single level, and then we do have a second-story addition above that as described being proposed.
And the second-story addition is at the 6-foot line, correct?
It is. We do have a projection of a bay window that does extend that we could show you as well. We may need your
That's what I wanted.
blessing on.
Yeah, that's not noticed as a modification, and it's not an allowed encroachment. So it would either need to come back for a separate modification or be revised just to a window.
We're happy to
All the-
remove it,
yeah,
so
all
it's
the
not
windows.
part of consideration.
Okay.
The unit in the back, that's an existing as-built, is yet to be legalized in some fashion. So we're also looking for some understanding about what we might be able to do in the interim between the time that this may be developed at some later date and the current status of this unusable building as it stands. It's non-conforming at 385 square feet, and it's been yellow tagged in some ways, and we'd like to help mitigate it as well, and any information you could help provide with regard to that would be helpful in understanding what we've been halted at this point from pursuing while we simultaneously try to get the project through holistically.
Well, and that issue isn't an issue for a staff hearing officer. That is an issue with the building department. If it's been yellow tagged, you need to follow their timelines and their guidelines. I don't have the authority to authorize you to be able to be using that as a
Certainly.
illegal dwelling unit during the interim. I don't have that authority.
I was just referring to the square footage being non-conforming by less than 15 square feet. So it's 385 versus 400, and we were told at one point we could come in with just a mod request for that if we tried to keep that existing to remain. So I guess it's kind of a moot point now, but we were really just wondering, is there an avenue to get that legalized while we pursue the addition to it at a future time?
Like I said, since it's not a request before me right now, I can't give input on it. That's something you'd work with staff with. So I'll just look at the project as it is proposed before me. But one of my questions is, so the existing garage is being demolished and rebuilt. Now, in reality, this is going to need to be demolished too and rebuilt and over.
Actually, we have under 50% demolition in mind for both the garage and this existing residence to maintain the existing status of it. So we don't actually plan on demolishing. There's a portion, approximately 2 feet, that becomes part of the circulation of the garage that we bring back. So we have area separation between buildings of 10 and 15 feet on the first and second floor, respectively. But the maintaining of the other areas within the garage and the garage slab are to remain, and we want to infill that, bring it up maybe 2 feet, because the whole area is being graded. There's about a 2-foot differential. So if we were to regrade this, that non-conforming element within the setback would probably only be about a 5-foot tall element. We need it to be at plate height. So that's the...
So have you done structural analysis that when you're in the field it's not going to fall? Because what the staff report is saying is that this is going to be demolished and rebuilt. And that's a lot of my concerns surrounds this building.
Certainly.
And so I need to be clear, is it going to be demolished and rebuilt, or
No,
is it going to be reused? Because I will put a condition on that if it is demolished, it needs to be relocated.
Right. No, it is not to be demolished. I believe that was some error. It is being remodeled and demolished less than 50%, which is the threshold of declining move from existing to remain. So just to be clear, this
Can you
whole
understand?
face of the building and the setback will remain. We have an opening, a window that we like to infill for the fire protection rule of no openings within a 2-foot distance of the property line, which currently there is some issues with regard to that on the existing structure. So we propose to actually just increase the width by the distance here of that garage. So this wall would be new, and then in front we've got an addition. But essentially what I was told previously in another project was that if greater than 50% of all walls have been demolished, including openings, then that would be considered a new structure. Or if a combination of roof and foundation exceed 50% in combination, that would be. So we're entirely removing the roof, but we're not entirely removing anything with the structure. We're pouring on top of it to build up. So there's no demolition within the foundation whatsoever, 100% within the roof most likely. So that's still within the qualification, as well as the framing of the openings on the exteriors are probably in the range of 30 to 40%, something less than. And with regard to your question on the existing structure as well, being a raised foundation, we do anticipate being able to work with that to remodel it to provide a possible basement as well beneath it, and that's yet to be proposed in the plans, but it will be an existing remodeled structure, so we're adding on essentially in the areas, and there's no change in the footprint of the existing building. It's an addition. So by code, we know that if we have a new structure on the ground level, then that would trigger ADA spaces in excess of what we provided per Chapter 11A on the ADA code, and we're under 11B. So just to be clear, as we understand it, any multifamily building that would even be a standalone building with 3 units, even if it was existing remodeled, would also require that 11A parking and other triggers that we've managed to avoid by keeping this all existing to remain. So certainly that is important to get clear.
Okay. Well, in terms of that rear unit, it's my role in this whole review process is a lot of different reviews, but my role is in regards to when you're requesting relief from zoning standards versus building standards. So if that building, whether it's demolished or just added on to or rehabbed, as long as it's observing the setbacks and not growing, adding on and infecting the open yard area, that's out of my purview. My question relates to the garage because it does require a setback modification and the open yard modification. So those are related to my concerns. So I don't know, did you want to explain like the open yard areas, how you
Certainly.
envision it to work?
Yes, we could go to the open
and-
yard diagram. That would probably be good. And just to compare it with the existing is helpful as well.
Sure.
We really would have enjoyed a 4-foot wide accessible pathway on the western side of the site, but there was a non-conforming 3'8" width to the face of the building, which forced us to really provide it on the opposite side. But it allowed a pedestrian area and some backyards to be established within these multifamily buildings and eliminate the vehicular access altogether, which was helpful. It also, just open space-wise, it does provide an additional space on the street for parking once that curb cut is infilled. But what we envision is that this wall, the sandstone wall, we would utilize the vehicular gate to make some pedestrian gates that wouldn't encroach into the right-of-way, but that would provide a gateway in. And then the pathway and ramp would lead to an accessible route both to the new front covered porch by coming up and traversing back. And then there's a 20 by 20 open space, which we envision would have a barbecue and some amenities and a nice canopy tree. Also, the trash flanks that area in the open space. And then this really does act as an open space. It is all continuous. And then the ramp begins here, but it is considered somewhat circulation. But we thought really this whole space would be utilized by all occupants on site. The outdoor open spaces act as egress as well for those bedrooms. And then we were managed to create a little platform, private patio in the back there that adequately provides some outdoor space for the second unit. We've also provided some trees that help the outdoor space function in privacy concerns, but we've added a few planters as well, and then utilized the full ability in the back for open space, although basement would probably require some light wells to encroach into that. So that describes the open space. And then on the second floor, we're asking for some decks that would be facing the parking lot on the second floor. This was in the living room, and then 2 bedrooms, so one would be facing south and west, 2 west facing balconies.
And these ones all meet the dimension requirements?
6 by
correct?
6, 36 square feet minimum.
And there's no landscape plan, correct, or is there?
We do have one generated. I don't know if it's included within this. The cover sheet shows landscaping. And just to talk to that, if that's a question, we
Actually, here, let's do this one that has more color.
just to talk about the frontage of, we've got a street tree, a magnolia tree existing to remain, and a large, thank you, pine tree. We believe it's a Jeffrey pine, and that's existing to remain, and kind of sets the context for what we're trying to create a craftsman style house now based on that. But the Tier 3 will require retaining of all of the impervious surfaces, and so we don't know how deep we need to provide in terms of the retention in this area, but there are several areas that are going to be planting areas, and we're going to have a storm drain catch basin at a low point at this location that will feed over into here. We have as well plantings that are per the Santa Barbara stormwater requirements for bioretention listed that will be shown at ABR that show all the requirements for those. And I believe there's a 100-foot linear requirement for a bioretention. And so if you count up the linear feet from this distance to this distance and this to this, you should see that that's around 100. We've also provided some interesting ideas for trees, in that the adjacent parcel has a mature oak tree, probably a 60, 70-foot canopy, and being that this really is on the gateway to the Oak Park neighborhood, Sola being kind of the end of that neighborhood, or the beginning, however you look at it, we thought that we'd kind of continue the oak theme and maybe put like a very, small oak here that over time could grow into this area that we're kind of carving out some light for. There's some citrus trees on site. We'd like to continue that idea, both orange, apple, apricot, I think we discussed, and a few other fruit trees that people could utilize. And then some privacy trees designated both for outdoor cars that may park there, and then there is some outdoor private, and then there is an upstairs balcony looking down, so we've got a tree to provide a bit of privacy over time for between the neighbors, and then just some additional trees in the back, fruit trees and such. But it's a combination of the required plantings per the stormwater requirement that we'd be happy to show you at the ABR.
Great, thank you. And then in terms of storage, there's all these storage little containers here. That's what these are, these bikes.
Just to be clear, these are garbage requirements.
Oh,
so
that's
we did
garbage.
check in
Okay.
with the requirements, and we are upping the size of the bins and the number of bins. And so we've provided 2 enclosures. One's kind of in a shed element, and one's kind of built into a sandstone base that's part of the structure there. But they all are accessible. And then we do have some existing storage within the existing carport. Now the carport's facing the opposite direction, but we're maintaining the location. We have removed that portion to provide bike storage, so the next submittal will show both the method of locking it and visually the 2-foot by 6-foot requirement. And we've placed it in this corner for that unit. The other storage areas for both the second unit and I believe the unit above are considered in the garage. And then the rear unit, since it has 2 carports, originally we had it kind of tucked under a stair area from the exterior, but having revised this a bit, we thought it might be more appropriate off the patio in a cabinet where it would be a 2-foot by 6-foot area in that location, and then they could lock it there. So storage-wise, I think that covers your question.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 1412 Castillo Street? Jay, would you like to provide any comments? Or Jay's the Planning Commission liaison. Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Or have we received any letters? Or,
We've received no contact from the public.
okay, great, thank you. All right, I did go out to the site, visited the site. There's a bunch of stuff going on there right now. It definitely needs to be cleaned up, so it's good you're proposing something to help clean it up. I think I'll break it down by your requests. So the first one is in regards to the front setback modification. The porch area, it's a very minor encroachment, and it's my understanding that the ABR requested, some kind of more street presence, or to be more street friendly. I like front porches, although it is a covered type element going into the front setback. It's appropriate use. It's consistent with the neighborhood. It's a supportable request. In regards to the garage modification, I really struggle with it. The AUD ordinance provides a lot of incentives to construct this type of project, and to be asking for additional modifications, I think needs more scrutiny. And we have a couple provisions in the code, which the staff report kind of touches on one of them. That's alterations that you're allowed to do to nonconforming structures. And through your discussion, it sounds like you're trying to get this to remain existing to get around some building code requirements. But in terms of nonconforming structures, you can demolish and rebuild on the same in the same location, provided you're not increasing the number of parking spaces, which you are because you want to provide more covered parking. That's understandable. The second provision was for the 3-foot interior setback. And for a 3-foot interior setback to pertain in this case, you have to have a narrow lot, which you meet. You have to have the garage doors not facing the street, which you meet, but it needs to not exceed the 20-foot depth. And in your instance, you are proposing a 22 or 23-foot depth. And so that gets to the question, gets also to the modification. When you're asking for modifications of the zoning ordinance, it's usually to meet the minimum requirements, so the minimum dimensions, 20 by 20. And when we look at modifications, we ask, is there a conforming option? Why can't you meet the code? And I'm not clear why you can't meet the code. I have real concerns. You say that this is not a demo rebuild. I have concerns with that. You're not really keeping the foundation you're building up. You're just keeping it in the same location. If you're using the exact same foundation, that may be different, but it's different. You're building up. And I've seen plenty of instances that during construction phase, the contractor accidentally runs into a wall, or they didn't realize they were supposed to keep the foundation. And so since this is a time for redevelopment, I think it's an appropriate time for it to be pushed back at least 3 feet. I don't understand why it is necessary so deep. And then again, these are extra parking spaces. That is a benefit to the neighborhood, but it's causing a modification request. So I don't know if you want to respond more to that, but I am struggling with your request.
I appreciate the opportunity to respond to that. We would happy to accommodate either concern that you've made, which is move it further out, leaving the face of it here, or moving it back 2 feet as the previous was submitted. So just to give you the reason for the increase in depth was to follow the upstairs plate, just so we didn't have any cantilever, but we could provide just 20 feet.
What would be
cantilever from the second floor? So we moved the second floor out to increase the width, and we moved the ground to be in the same plane, but that doesn't necessarily need to be per se. So we'd be happy to move that back to a 20-foot minimum conforming garage standard, if that's your request, or if I'm hearing you would rather us move it further away from the property line, then we'd be happy to accommodate that as well. Either would
I would
be
be
possible.
I would be supportable of you wouldn't need the mod then. You would just need admin, right? Because so if you moved it 3 feet, and so you met the 3-foot setback, you only had your minimum. You had 20 feet this way, 20 by 20 or 20, and then you'd still be able not to have that cantilevered. The design board could give a minor zoning exception for that reduced setback. And in that case, that would be better in that then you are increasing the open yard or the open space.
Just to be clear, though, we are 18 here and we are 3 here. We're not 6 here. So even if this moves 1 foot, these spaces are non.
I'm not asking you to move this part. I'm just asking you to squeeze it this way to be 20.
Okay,
And
but
this
that would
way,
be 2 feet. But that you're saying that you assumed it was 1 foot off. I believe it's 1.6 off the property line existing. But that's I think we could agree to that.
yeah, and there's a special, so, oh, scale,
Yeah.
scale.
I think
So that it would be a 3-foot setback from the property line. So you'd meet the 3-foot setback. The other issue that would be done would be verified in plan check again is as parking, if this parking space is actually in the interior setback here, because that might be,
we were told 3 feet, and it's set at 3, but then we were just updated that it is 6 for multifamily. So does that apply as well, and does that
The 6 foot is for covered parking.
just covered? Okay, so we're okay there.
so what that may mean is that this area would be the driveways into here, it just couldn't be denoted as parking. I mean, actually it does say drive, oh, well, it has a triangle, but it says driveway. But in terms of what my concern is providing more open area on the site. And so the preference would be to pull this away 3 feet. And if you kept it at the 20-foot dimensions, that could be a minor zoning exception versus a modification.
And ABR makes the
Yeah.
call on that. I think that sounds like a good.
Well, I have a concern about this area here because actually this neighbor has built up some stuff over on this side, right up to the property line. I mean, not to the property line, but right up to the garage.
Encroaching.
So I haven't had use of that space for quite a while. And, you know, it's not been a point of contention. We get along, but if I move this, and then the reason for moving it is to have this as open space.
Well, this is shown on here as open space. So if it's not being used as open space, the neighbor's using it, that's an incorrect indication. So that's a private issue, that he has improvements over your property line. I'm looking at development on your site, and this is indicated as being open.
Right.
So the assumption being that any encroachments here are going to be removed, and this is going to be restored to open area for your property.
Yeah. I mean, this is correct. I just don't use it, you know, because they've got their stuff there. So I just need to get that out on the table.
But what you're proposing requires open area, both usable and just open area, and
Right.
private and stuff. And so if this is indicated and being counted towards your requirement for your development, and it's not really going to be that way in the future, that's erroneous and the modification's different. So that causes an issue whether I require this being 3 foot or allow it to be 1.5 foot. It causes an issue.
It's also an improvement to the fire safety issue because there's a code requirement for openings within 3 feet. But
Okay,
2
I
feet, 3 feet of the
I
property.
realized and
Sure, they'd be
and
happy to accommodate
anticipated
you.
We would have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to misrepresent it, which
That's
apparently
good.
I have been.
Well, this plan, I noticed on the site plan, or on the site visit, that there was a building in right here.
Yeah, shed.
But since it wasn't shown as on these plans, it was the assumption as part of the reconstruction of the site, all the
Right.
improvements, that was going away, because it wasn't indicated as remaining.
Yeah. Well,
So that's something that you'd have to work out with the neighbor.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so so in regards to the interior setback modification, can you get the code out from the? Thanks, Stephanie. In regards to the interior setback modification, I just want to verify, because I understand you wanted to provide parking in this area if it conforms with the code. So if there's 2 options. One, if you wanted to have it remain that depth, my action would be to approve a 3-foot encroachment. If you wanted to reduce it to the 20 feet minimum, then it would be a minor zoning exception. And what my action would be would actually to deny this. And I would be clear that the denial of this interior setback is not because it's a 3-foot encroachment is not supportable, because I would not want to send that message to the design board, but that it's no longer necessary. That modification would be no longer necessary because you would meet the provisions of the code with the ABR granting that exception. And it sounds like they would be supportive of it because they're supportive of it like this, not knowing that it was the encroachment was different.
Correct. I think that long as it's clear that through the discussion at the show that it became apparent that that was the case and that both parties were.
Yeah, there was a concession at the show hearing, and Stephanie typically follows projects like this through the design board.
I could see it being a confusing statement with respect to support of at the ABR, but I see the.
Yeah, I don't want them to think that a denial would be that the 3 foot's not supportive. So before I do that, Stephanie, if you can look that up. Okay, and then in regards to the open yard modification, that's a tricky one. There's the intent of the AUD ordinance, the program is to allow more units in a density, and in this particular case, base density for your site is 3 units. So to be able to take advantage of the AUD program, you have to have the 4 units. So then, you get into the unit size, the opening, the open yard, the setbacks, and try to balance it all out. So is that I was correct in my interpretation, right?
Correct. It's not actually a minor zoning exception, though. It's just a decision by the design review body. It doesn't specify that it's a minor zoning exception.
Okay. So yeah, it's not really a waiver, it's a hybrid thing. So yeah, just that the design board would review and approve it as part of the project.
I think they'd be supportive of that improvement. It's helping your neighbors, helping lighten air.
An open yard area. So what my action would be, I guess, deny it because it's no longer necessary. Project's been revised, or I'll make it clear, and I'll talk with the staff of ABR too, so they understand, because I don't want to send the message that 3-foot setback is. I had concerns with any encroachment into there. It's just that this amount and being oversized was not supportable. So in regards to the open yard area, here's this plan. Which one is this one shows, I'm trying to show for the people at home what's the best. I guess maybe this one shows the open yard area the most, but there is a lot of color. Your plans have a lot of information, and might be better to simplify them a little bit, because I know you're trying to differentiate between here's landscaping and this is all hardscape. This is all permeable, correct?
Correct.
And then here's this area. This is a carport. It's covered. In regards to open space areas, the zoning ordinance doesn't specify whether it needs to be landscaped areas or could it be hardscaped areas. It specifies more of structures and open yard areas. So in terms of what the composition of this area is, that's more of the design board, and then also SWMP requirements. So the amount of your open yard areas, I can get there to the finding for a number of reasons. There are some areas here that don't count towards it, but it is functional. Right now there is this wall here, and you're proposing to keep that wall area. So this functions as their private outdoor area, their usable area. In regards to the second story unit, it does have adequate deck area. There's a variety of ones. There's not just one big one, but there's different ones off the living areas that they can enjoy, and have some areas outside versus inside. This rear unit here, it is built setback to setback, but it has some areas out. Do you know by heart what the plan number is?
3.
2, 3. I figured you would. probably wouldn't agree these. So going to this, although it is the setback areas, there are areas denoted that have usable area outside. And setbacks are setbacks to provide separation of properties, but it's also, you can use them. So it could be used and function as a part of it. So in regards to the requested open yard modification, that is supportable. And also, I don't think it was brought up in the staff report, but you are trying to work around existing development. And so, this is you're confined by these existing units and then adding the 2 more. So there is some constraints on your property too. And as both you and Stephanie have pointed out, you are increasing the open yard from the street. So I could support that modification. And then Stephanie talked about the conditions of approval. You've read them and you understand them. The conditions of approval regarding rental housing and this rent survey and the public works requirement and the access covenant and that. You understand all those? Let your architect.
Yes,
I guess.
Okay.
we've got, yes,
You've
we
covered
do.
them. Okay. All right. So in regards to the front setback modification, like I said, I can support the front setback modification. It is appropriate improvement. It provides more usable outdoor area. It provides character to the unit from the street. I support that one. In regards to the interior modifications, or the interior setback modification to the garage, since as we discussed that you're agreeable to make it meet the code requirements of 20 feet, 20 by 20, and have a setback 3 feet, this modification is no longer necessary. And so it's, I don't know if I need to formally deny it. It's just not necessary for the project as amended. And then in regards to the open yard area, although it doesn't meet the code requirements, it does provide adequate open yard area in the ways that it's designed. So I can make those findings. And again, the environmental finding, I make that one too. My action and improve your project. My action is subject to the conditions of approval as outlined in the staff report. I don't believe I need to add any additional. You know what, Jessica, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
In regards to documenting the change, is that what you're coming up to talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Reardon, I think I would recommend that it would be a denial of the interior yard setback, and then just so we have it on record in the event there's that they don't come back again requesting the same item, because it's you have articulated in the hearing today that it would not be supported, and but we could just reflect in the minutes that the owner and architect are amenable to the meeting the zoning requirement.
Okay, yeah, because I was going back and forth. Should I have it that it's not applicable and then have a condition that it be revised to meet the minimum standards? But that's cleaner if I just deny it, and I'll be very clear in the minutes that it's.
I can only think they may want us to return with the new design to confirm with you that that's consistent. But if so, would that be necessary? Would that be available at an over-the-counter?
It would be a substantial conformance determination. So you would submit it to Stephanie, and she would review it, and if necessary, consult with me. It doesn't necessarily have to be within the public hearing setting unless there was something glaring that she had some question that she thought needed to be elevated to the public hearing setting. But yeah, quite often Stephanie will review projects for substantial conformance and say the change is so minor, or say it is in conformance with it. So either way she can make that determination.
Well, we're fine.
Okay, so then I'll do that.
I think because there isn't a substitute sheet showing
Yeah.
a conforming design, that's why we would request the denial of that, and then knowing again that it will, when it returns to the ABR for review, then they would show the conforming design there.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Jessica. So then my action will be to not deny the interior setback modification. My action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period, and if either of those would occur, Stephanie would contact you. Okay?
Thank you for your time.
Great, thanks. And I adjourn the meeting.